What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Noot News podcast. We have an absolutely loaded docket for you guys today. We're going to be talking about Yamamoto. We're going to be talking about potential moves the Cardinals could make, as we have ever since the end of the season. But the most important thing we're going to talk about today is extensions. As we talked about last episode, the Atlanta Braves have kind of like built this core together, and they've extended all these guys to make sure that it stays together for the better part of a decade. And so we're really interested in seeing whether the Cardinals can copy that to start winning championships.
Yeah, so this past week, Lars Nootbaar and Nolan Arenado were in Japan. I think they're still in Japan for a little vacation, but on their way, they stopped by the Orix Buffaloes postseason game to watch Yoshinobu Yamamoto make a start. I don't know. Lars Nootbaar was wearing his jersey, so that is pretty exciting. And there's been reports that he's been trying to lure Yamamoto over to St. Louis with his toasted raviolis and all of that. So that's pretty exciting. So I don't know. What do you guys think of all that? Is it potential recruitment season, or are they just having fun at a random ball game?
I mean, it's got to be a mix of both, right? Like, I don't know how much this will actually play into Yamamoto's decision, but it can't hurt. I mean, Nolan Arenado shares the same agent as Yamamoto, so having him go down there and the Nootbaar, they already have that relationship and connection. It's starting to be more and more reported now. The Cardinals have a strong infrastructure over in the Japanese market. They have a working relationship with Yamamoto's team. Like, there's just a bunch of little breadcrumbs that, like, I think could be the difference maker if they actually make a competitive offer on him. I still think Yamamoto takes the highest offer. But if it's the Mets and the Cardinals are throwing out the same offer, that could be something that draws him. Or who knows? Like you've seen with some guys who come from overseas that there's a comfortability factor that they need too, and that some of them get homesick or want to feel at home. And so it might not come down to all the dollars in the world, like some of these factors of having already some friends in the clubhouse, people they know, the history of overseas players from Asia coming over to the Cardinals and some success there. There could be some things there. I don't know what you guys think more than that. I would say it's more of like it can't help or it can't hurt, but it definitely helps.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as Josh here. I'm not sure how much it helps. And also, I just think like to even talk about this, we have to have an accurate understanding of the situation. I think a lot of players or a lot of people are comparing the Yamamoto situation to the Ohtani situation because he's the last Japanese player to come over with so much hype. But obviously in the Ohtani situation, in that instance, he signed a deal that was capped at a certain dollar limit, right? Because he was coming over as an amateur. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what was going on. So
Yeah.
he couldn't sign for more than basically what the MLB would allow. And so that's why he's so cheap for the Angels right now, or was. He's about to not be. And also that's why like Yamamoto isn't subject to that. So I think Josh is right. I do think it'll be the highest bidder. But again, like it could make a small difference, right? Also, was Ohtani over there, or was Nootbaar over there to like film some commercials initially? Like, isn't that why he was in Japan, or am I wrong?
Yeah, he did have some commercials there. I think he's doing some golf event in
Okay.
Japan. He did a little event with some kids, basically trying to promote the love of baseball, which is awesome to see that he's doing that. But yeah, there was a pretty wholesome picture of him with his mom doing some Japanese ads the other day. So that's
Hmm.
International superstar Lars Nootbaar. Like,
Nootbaar
who would have thought back in 2019? Crazy.
is
I mean,
crazy.
he was talking the other day in an interview about how Shohei Ohtani gave him a luxury brand watch. So I mean, if the Cardinals are looking for a branding opportunity to sell some luxury watches, I feel like there's a perfect opportunity with a free agent target this offseason.
Yeah. Speaking of some merch, if you want to hit the Lids affiliated link, talk about that product move there. So I don't know. I mean, the way Newbar talks about Otani, you would think there would be some, I don't know. Obviously, it's not happening, but I would love to know if the Cardinals actually got competitive with an offer, how much he'd consider it. I mean, it's not going
Yeah,
to happen, but I would love to know like what he thinks. So we'll see.
it'd be incredible. I like Andrew. I would love to have Ohtani here, but I think Josh is right.
Yeah, I mean, we all know it's not happening, but anyway, things that might be happening. we're talking about Gold Glove candidates. And Tommy Edman, I think, was the only Gold Glove candidate that the Cardinals have had, which is really unfortunate for a team that won like 6 or 7 Gold Gloves just a couple years. Nolan Arenado is most notably is not going to be winning a Gold Glove for the first time in his career. He wasn't even nominated for the third base Gold Glove award, which I think is really disappointing. I mean, he didn't have a good season defensively, like if we're being honest, but I think he probably still should have got a nod. His defense was above average, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I do think Edman does have a really strong case of the utility Gold Glove this year. I'm surprised he won it over, or Donovan won it over him last year. So I think he should be going for his second one right now. It's interesting though, if you look at outs above average, I think Betts is probably his biggest competition just because of the flashiness that it was this year that he moved around the diamond, but he was negative in outs above average at every position Betts this year except for center field. So like, I mean, defensive stats are weird. So I don't put a ton of stock into him. I think Betts is a great defender, but I think analytically, if you look, it should be Donovan's or Edman's award to lose. You would hope he'd win that one instead of the Cardinals would walk away with a Gold Glove this year. But the fact that Arenado wasn't like done this year, or like Carlos Santana was a first base Gold Glove candidate, that was weird to me. Like, thought Goldie could have made it in there. Who knows? But
I mean, I thought Goldie had a better defensive season than he's had recently, right?
Yeah,
like he was excellent. I was really surprised to see Santana, who I'm sorry, like I don't think he's bringing that much to the table defensively.
I don't know. Maybe he scoops the ball really well. I don't think I'm very mobile, but I mean, this is probably a conversation for another day, but it just goes back into the conversation that the Cardinals defense was extremely weak this year. And I think there's some natural improvement will happen just with Walker getting better, win at shortstop for a full season, Gorman continuing to develop, Arenado not having a terrible first half. But at the same time, like that was a big concern, and also probably contributed to the fact that their pitching staff was so bad. Now, I think it all goes back to the quality of the starting pitching, but I think it's something to monitor going into the season.
I mean, if
it's just crazy how good they were a few years ago. They were one of the best defensive teams we'd ever seen, and they won a team Gold Glove, which was kind of a new award recently. And to go from that to this is just wild.
Yeah, and I think it's underrated too. Like Tyler O'Neill played a full season that year and he's an incredible left fielder when he's healthy. And there's an argument that I've kind of wrote him off of next year's roster, but there's an argument that his number, even with just his defensive value, like he's still probably worth $6 million a year. And so I think there are some some decisions that Cardinals have to make this offseason when it comes to prioritizing some defensive flexibility, especially what they decide to do with Edman or Donovan in the trade market, stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Arenado's baseball savant page, and his outs above average was 88th percentile this year. So I don't really know what's going on with that. Goldschmidt had 82nd percentile in his outs above average as well. So, I mean, not Gold Glove worthy. I think Brian Hayes probably deserves. I mean, he probably deserves the Platinum Glove, if we're being honest. But probably should have still got a nod.
I think this just feeds back into the idea that Gold Gloves aren't always all about defense. There's definitely like the defensive metrics matter, but the other things that matter, in my opinion, are your highlight reel. I think that's why Nolan Arenado won last year. There are 3 plays that you can point to that Arenado made last year, like the jump throw in Tampa, that bare hand that he threw across to Goldie to barely get someone out. Like, I mean, I feel like you guys know what I'm talking about with these. There was the third one that he made, the one where he threw over the runner's shoulder, like it was like whizzed right by his ear to gun someone down at the plate from around the bag. Like that was crazy, right? Those 3 plays, and that's better than anything Hayes did individually, even though Hayes' metrics triumphed. But also like offense apparently matters, and it shouldn't, but it does in these awards. And just like being a good player, right? Like that's why people get nominated for these. And I think that's why, and reputation. So it's not all about metrics, which is sad because I think you'd see Arenado and Goldie getting at least nods to like be finalists, although I don't think either of them would win the award. But I digress. It's an imperfect system. It's hard. There's more to Gold Glove voting than defensive metrics anyway. So,
I mean, Austin Riley's below average and outs above average and arm strength this year. So I don't know what he's doing on this list, but I guess that proves
he played on a team that won a lot of games and he hit a lot of home runs.
Yeah.
A Gold Glove, right? Team success in play at the plate. So, well, speaking of, well, you kind of talked about it earlier, Sandy, but like Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Michael Harris, Sean Murphy, Ozzie Albies, Ronald Acuna Jr., all are players that have received early extensions from the Atlanta Braves. I don't think there's any of them you could look at right now as bad deals.
No,
I think
that hit rate is crazy.
Yeah, which I mean is something to keep in mind is that the fact like when you look at the Rangers and their free agency success, like they've paid out a ton of large deals. DeGrom has gone bad so far, but they like have a crazy high success rate. That's why they turn it around. The Braves, if you start handing out a bunch of extensions and they don't work out, it doesn't look as good. But I do think the model they've set other teams around baseball is starting to try and replicate, whether it's the Diamondbacks of Corbin Carroll or the Mariners of Julio Rodriguez or X, Y, and Z across the board. So we're going to go through and talk about some different extension candidates, people we think on the Cardinals are most deserving. I don't know. Do you guys want to just throw out names when we go through it, or do we kind of want to go through our mocked? We talked earlier a little bit about who we would put in an order. Do we kind of want to go 5 through 1 of the order we had earlier? Maybe these honorable mentions first in our top 4, since that was pretty universal.
Yeah, let's throw out some honorable mentions first. Let's do that.
Okay. My honorable mention, I'll go ahead and get out of the way, was Paul Goldschmidt. Because I do think at the end of the day, I doubt that they'll let him walk. I just don't really see them replacing what he'll be able to offer in the lineup internally. And I don't see them trading him, which would be the way to capitalize on his value now. So I do think you probably end up extending him at some point. I wouldn't prioritize it over any of the names on this list. And I also think there's a cap to the number I give Goldschmidt. I'm not handing him a bag. But I don't think he's looking for that either. I think you probably get him at a low 20s millions if we need to on that kind of thing. It's probably a 2-year deal, and I think it's pretty safe. I think he's got a lot of upside still. I think he rebounds. He had a really strong end of the season after a really terrible summer, which is weird for him. He was always hot in the summers, usually cold at the beginning, cold at the end. He ended up being red hot at the start, cold in the summer, and then warmer at the end of the year. So I think you bring back Paul Goldschmidt, 2-year deal, something like a $40 to $50 million total. I don't know. What do you guys think of Paul Goldschmidt?
I mean, I think this is interesting because it's a totally different type of extension than we're going to be talking about for the most part. Because most of these guys, we're talking about buying out as much of their prime as possible. And so exactly, this is going to be like way lower in terms of years. But I think you're right. I think the Cardinals should be interested in bringing Goldie back. I don't think you get better by moving on from Goldschmidt. I've seen a lot of Goldschmidt trade talk lately. I think trading him doesn't fill in holes that you have, and it opens up a new hole that you might not be able to fill in. And it also would put Jordan Walker at second base or at first base truthers more room. And I just hate that idea so much. But anyway, yeah, I would have no issue with it. I actually think he'd be a little cheaper than you have stated. Like, I think you could get Goldie on like 17 or 18 million.
That'd be great.
AAV. Like, I don't know. I don't think he wants to move. Goldie has a family. Obviously, I never want to be reading into what a player's thinking too much. But I can't see him wanting to move again. I don't know. So yeah, I think that'd be a great deal. And it's something the Cardinals should absolutely consider. And like you said, he was very good this year. He underperformed his expected stats. In some ways, he hit the ball harder and, at more optimal angles than he did last year. And it just didn't work out, didn't fall. So yeah.
Yeah. My honorable mention.
Well, I was going to say, actually, I was a little bit wrong. I think he turned it on in July, but his September was actually a little bit below league average. So, yeah, I mean, it was a little bit concerning as a whole on the year. I don't think anyone's going to try and act like Goldschmidt had an excellent season, but I do think he's been overhated. And I just don't get if anyone thinks they need to trade Paul Goldschmidt right now, I think that doesn't make the team better in 2024. And realistically, I don't think Nolan Arenado would take it. I think that would be the final straw, and he's like, send me to LA at that point. Yeah. So I do think you're kind of in a spot where you got to keep him. And I don't really think Alec Burleson's strong enough of a player to be like, oh, let's move on from Paul Goldschmidt. Brendan Donovan, I guess, could be the first baseman, but I don't think that's worth it either. And the Jordan Walker is clearly the right fielder of the future. So none of those options make sense.
Yeah. My honorable mention was Tommy Edman. I know Victor Scott's coming. He's waiting in center field, and that's really exciting. But Tommy Edman just holds down a lot of different positions. And we all know this season, especially how bad injuries can get, especially towards the end of the season. And Tommy Edman, he was hurt for a little bit, but if he's not hurt, he holds down second base, shortstop, center field, whatever you want, really. He can play the other field corners as well. And he was my spark plug when we gave out end of season awards. I just think he always jolts the team when the team is going through like bad stretches. He'll hit so many walk-offs. I can think of like 3 or 4 Tommy Edman walk-offs that were just so exciting, even when the team is like down. And he'll just get that clutch hit for you. And I just think there's a lot of trade talk. So if we can get something good for him, that would be awesome as well. Get a good starting pitcher. But I think he is expiring contract at the end of the year. Is that right?
And in 2025, so he's got 2 years left.
Okay, 2 more years left. But I think if we could hold on to him for a little bit longer, maybe like a 2 or 3 year extension, that's the most I would give him. Not like some of these other players where we want to extend them like the Braves. But that's why he's my honorable mention.
I think before Sajazi, I would have been more in with you, but I think to me, Sajazi proved, and like this guy coming over, I wasn't saying, oh my gosh, he's definitely going to be a regular at some point. But after watching him and getting like really a front row seat to what he's capable of, I just think he's got a higher ceiling than Edman. And so for me, I'd be okay moving on from Edman. I don't think Edman plays the defense that Wynn is going to play in the future now. Edman's a great defender, don't get me wrong, but I think he's a great defender at second, not really at short anymore. But maybe I'm wrong. Like Edman could win a Gold Glove this year and he could prove me wrong. And maybe Tommy Edman could go immediately be a Platinum Glove caliber shortstop again. I never know. But I just kind of think he's really expendable. And I think if you lock up Edman, then you're committing to trading Sajazi or Donovan. And I really don't want them to trade Donovan because as we'll talk about Gorman later, but he's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So
I think you also look at Edman this year, like this was a really bad year at the plate. He was 92% or 92 WRC plus, so 8% below league average at the plate. He was worth 2.3 WAR, which is nice over 140 games, but that was a major step back from last year. And like for context, like Donovan had a 2.1 WAR and played in 50 less games. Paul Dion is only worth 1 WAR less. I just think like Edman's strengths you find in other people on the roster. Like you assume Victor Scott's going to come up at some point, and like you already know he's going to be an elite base stealer, and you already know he's going to be an elite defensive center fielder. And so I think those are the things you bank on with Tommy. Now, could Tommy technically be a better hitter? Sure, but I don't think it's like enough of a gap that you worry about the step back. I think the same for Mason Wynn. Like even if Wynn really struggles at the plate, I think his defense will be good enough that you can manage him as your 9-hole hitter for the year. And by the time, if it's really bad and the deadline comes around, you bring a veteran shortstop in for half a season, or Sajazi's that answer. And the second base, you have Brendan Donovan and Nolan Gorman. So I do think it's interesting too. Edman's probably going to make in the $7 million range this year too. So he's no longer cheap anymore. Like that's not expensive, but he's also not making league minimum like Brendan Donovan or Nolan Gorman are. And I just don't think his value is probably at its highest right now as a trade asset. And so I think you cash in on that. I don't think it'd be a bad idea to extend him. I don't think his strengths are as needed anymore. And I also think those are things that'll deteriorate over time. Like, I don't think he'll become a bad defender, but I don't know if he'll be this elite. And then his speed will taper off over time. I know he mashes lefties, but that's like 25% of the league. So I just think, and you've got your whole lineup really mashes lefties. So I don't think you need this guy. Like you've got Dylan Carlson can mash lefties. If you keep Tyler Neal, he can do that. Obviously, Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, Wilson Contreras do that. So I just think he's more valuable as a trade chip. But I love Tommy Edman, though. It's not a hate on Tommy Edman. I just think they have so many good middle infielders that, and even long-term center field, Nootbaar, Carlson, I think you can get by with those two until Victor Scott's ready.
And that's not even to mention a lot of the depth options the Cardinals have, where it's like, I really do wonder if Nick Dunn got plate appearances, how much worse at the plate would he really be than Tommy Edman? Nick Dunn had a 940 OPS in a large sample size at AAA last year. How much worse would Cesar Prieto be? And is Cesar Prieto a better base runner at this point in his career than Tommy Edman is now? I mean, it's like, I think you're right. I think you can cobble together Tommy Edman using surplus of other players on the roster at this point.
Yeah.
And that's not to say he's totally expendable. Like you said, we love Tommy, but it's a crowded situation. And if one guy needs to go, I do think Tommy might be the guy.
I mean, right-handed Tommy Edman is just Barry Bonds, so I don't know. I'm a big believer. If he goes Cedric Mullins style and he just bats right-handed, he might be the best hitter on the team. No, we can go on to the next honorable mention now.
Hey, that'd be kind of cool. But for me, this is going to be a little bit controversial, I think. If it's not controversial here, it'll be controversial among fans. So prepare. But I think the Cardinals should extend Giovanny Gallegos again. He's coming off of the worst season of his career. So why do I think they should extend him? It's because they're just pitchers like Giovanny Gallegos don't grow on trees. Here's my argument. Okay, Gallegos has been with the Cardinals now for 5 seasons, parts of 6 seasons, actually, if you count the short in 2018 he spent with us. Over those first 4 seasons, so 2019 through 2022, 4 full seasons, 228 innings pitched. Oh my goodness, a 2.84 ERA, 1.42 ERA plus. He was very quietly like a top 10 reliever in all of baseball. And he took a step backwards last year, but I've written about this at length. I've argued about this with people at length. I think Giovanny Gallegos was one of the most poorly managed players in all of baseball last year. By that, I mean, it's really simple. When Giovanny Gallegos doesn't have it, he doesn't have it. So pull him and don't wait. He gave up multiple home runs in every appearance that he gave up a home run last year. So it felt really simple to me the 4th time around to just not leave him in, but instead they let him give up 3. So that was wild. But again, pitchers like him don't grow on trees. By that, I mean, you just don't find relievers who are good year in, year out for long stretches. Reliever is such a volatile position. I would argue there's more inter-year volatility between relievers than any position in baseball and maybe any position in American sports. It's really difficult to find guys with consistency over multiple years. And if you can get that in Geo and you can get it cheap, I say you jump on that.
Yeah, I won't I'm not a strong disagree on it. I think the part that I would wait on is he still has a club option for 2025 at $6.5 million. So I wouldn't be in a rush to extend him again. Because he'll be entering age 34 at 2026. And that's still pretty, I mean, he's probably still got 3 more years after that as a reliever, but I don't know what kind of number he's going to be looking at right now. If it's 6 or below, I don't think it's a big deal. But if he's wanting to go higher than that or want like 2 to 3 years added on, I don't know how much I love that idea. Andrew, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I would rather turn the conversation to Ryan Helsley as an honorable mention than Giovanny Gallegos.
Yeah, I mean, Gallegos, I've shared my thoughts on here. I think we're kind of on opposite ends on where we feel about Gallegos. Like, yeah, if he looks like he's bad, you can pull him, but there's a 3-batter minimum now. Like you can do a lot of damage, 3 batters, like in the, like I bring it up all the time when I talk about Gallegos, but the WBC semifinal, double to Ohtani, then you walk Yoshida, and then Murakami hits a walk-off double and the game's over. Oh, look at that. That's really, really tough. And that was all just 3 batters. So sometimes you don't have the leeway to let Gallegos run that far. And I feel like for a reliever who I believe to be extremely poor in clutch situations, I don't hate seeing him in like the 7th or the 8th. It makes me nervous every time he's out there because you never know what you're going to get with him. But he's not someone I'm going out to extend right away.
Well, to your point, Sandy, though, I'm looking, he ranks 35th in baseball in reliever salary, which that means, I mean, anyone who's ranked above him has a post 6-year contract. Like they've been in the league a while, so they have their free agent contracts. So that's really good value. Because I mean, you could say like until this year, Josh Hader. It's like, well, he was through arbitration. Like you're not like those. I mean, and he probably made more than Gallegos through arbitration, but like those, like you can't just like sign a 22-year-old reliever who just came up for $800,000. Doesn't happen. So that's great value for a guy in free agent. So if he wants like $5 to $6 million, I think the value's great there. I guess I just don't know what his price point is.
I think with Gio, you'd be looking at something where you say, hey, we'll turn the club option into just like we'll lock that down. So you're not thinking you might be out of the job. And if you do that, you lock it down at the same salary it's at, or maybe raise it slightly. You say like, okay, we'll buy out your club option for, that plus $250,000, and then we'll throw on another year at 5.5. Like, I don't see how he doesn't take that. Guaranteeing more money to a guy who's a reliever where anything can go wrong in an instant, even a guy like Gio who's proven consistency, I think he probably takes that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But Helsley, that's very interesting. Tell me about that.
I just think, like, again, reliever volatility is tough, but I mean, again, last year was honestly, like, it wasn't an all-time reliever season, but if you go look at some of his metrics that compare to top individual reliever seasons, it was up there in like some of the top 100 seasons, which I mean, hundreds of relievers pitch a year, so like that's a really good thing. And then when he came back from his injury, he looked like himself again. Mm-hmm. And so I just think if you could buy out 1 or 2 years of free agency from Helsley, get him on short, I wouldn't give him like super long-term deal, but I think he's got 2 years left of control. So you give him a 4 or 5 year deal. You assume that 1, maybe 2 of those years, he might not be great, but he'll probably be good enough. And then you get probably 3 elite years out of him. I think that's worth it in this market for a reliever.
Yeah, Helsley, I feel like I trust a lot more than Gallegos. Yeah, he had the blow up in the playoffs, but he was hurt during that outing. He has also a lot more exciting stuff than Gallegos. He goes up to 103 at certain points. I don't see why not. I think the holdup might be on Helsley's end because there might have been some arbitration stuff going on between him and the organization. He did actually tweet that, like, someone quoted him saying like that he was frustrated with the organization, or like complete misquoted, and then he like quote tweeted that, and I thought that was pretty funny. He was like, I don't recall ever saying that.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, Helsley's pure stuff is among the best in baseball. Very, very difficult to do what he does. And he has multiple pitches that are incredible, so they play off each other really well. And yeah, if we could have his 2022 every year, like, anyone in the world would take that. One of the best seasons ever, like you said. So I'm with you. I'd be fine buying Helsley out. And I think when you're the Cardinals, you just have to remember that you're not the Rays. The Cardinals can't get by building a bullpen that consists only of guys making league minimum, because we, for some reason, just have trouble finding those arms. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think it's okay to reach into free agency with these guys and pay your bullpen a little bit. And also that helps you not make the mistakes that the Cardinals have made in the past, because when the Cardinals bring in relievers, generally it goes really poorly. I can point to Andrew Miller, Luke Gregerson, Greg Holland, Brett Cecil. I mean, the list goes on and on. And even the guys that they bring in that succeed, like a Bud Norris, there were other problems. There were off the field issues when Bud Norris was here. I know he and Jordan Hicks got into it a few times. So they really seem to struggle in that department. And so I'm totally with you guys. Extending relievers, for me, a big yes for the Cardinals, when it might not be a yes for every team.
Yeah, and I think if you look at like payroll of the Astros and the Phillies this year, they allocate a pretty good amount of dollars to their bullpen. It's not crazy, but they have a couple of those $5 to $9 million deals in their bullpen, and they both have a reliever that's paid over $10 million. And so it's not every elite bullpen you have to spend a lot of money on, but unless you can really trust yourself, like the Rays, you got to spend on the guys are good. So, okay, moving into the top 4 extension candidates, we all had these guys in our top 5, and they averaged out to be our top 4, and it makes sense. They're the guys that most people would point to on the end. Brendan Donovan came out as our 4th guy on average. I think I had him ranked as the 4th guy, and you guys had him ranked both as your 3rd. And I love Brendan Donovan. I feel like I've been a truther of him lately. On the season, he had a 118 WRC plus, and he was, I think, 148 WRC plus from late May until when he was shut down with injury. Plays all over the field. You can compare him from a weighted runs created. He's the same as Kyle Schwarber over the last 2 years, which I'm not saying he's a better hitter than Kyle Schwarber, but like that's the kind of value that Brendan Donovan brings to your lineup, while also playing all over the field, at least league average or above average defense at pretty much every position besides center field and catcher. Shortstop, he's probably below league average, but like you can plug him there. I just think he's a guy that you just can count on to be good every year. And I think there's more coming. I think he's shown that with the bat, and when he gets a full season under his belt, I think people will stop seeing him as kind of like this, like in like, I think there's some Cardinals Nation who think he's a little bit overrated. I think he's highly underrated. And I think all of baseball is going to see, I think baseball really values him already. I think he's a guy that could obviously last offseason, the Oakland and Toronto really wanted him. There are teams that are going hard after Brendan Donovan. I think he's very valuable.
I'm totally with you. Donovan's a winner.
Hit a grand slam, and I'm depressed.
I just was going to say that real quick. Oh,
who did?
The Adolis
Garcia.
Yikes!
No,
that's an extension candidate.
I mean, he might have been an extension candidate. I mean, that's what the truthers will say. But anyway.
Yeah, the people that forget his 52 WRC plus with the Cardinals. And remember when he tripped coming around third, and then everyone was like, why is he even on the team? Trade him right now. Those people are the same people that are saying, I can't believe the Cardinals missed this obvious talent.
Yeah.
But anyway, Donovan's a winner. And that's what I see in him. A lot of people were saying that he took a step back this year, just looking at the season-wide numbers. But what Josh said makes a lot of sense, right? He got so much better as the year went on. He was one of the best hitters in the league, which is okay. So when you think about his offseason, right, where all he did was talk about adding bat speed, adding power, and we saw the power play in spring training. It was pretty exciting when we saw that power start to click that last month that he was healthy. So obviously Donovan is not going to be that 148 WRC plus guy all the time moving forward, because that's, almost MVP production. But I do think he can be a 130 guy. You see it, someone with elite bat to ball skills who just added a lot of power, and then he flashed that power not only in spring training but during the regular season. Remember all the work he did with Driveline. Really exciting to see that. And like Josh said, the defensive flexibility, and he's above average at most of those positions. Yeah, this is something the Cardinals should be jumping on quickly.
Yeah, I mean, you look at WRC plus rankings this year too. Like, if he's a 130 guy, that puts him like 18th in baseball, above Luis Robert, right behind Brandon Nimmo. Like, he's just an extremely valuable hitter. And so even if he sits around 120 with the defensive flexibility he has, that's a winning player. You need that kind of player in your lineup every single day. And if you lock him up now, that contract's not going to be crazy. So I think that's part of the appeal here too, versus some other names on this list is the kind of number you're looking at for Donovan. It's not the Julio Rodriguez deal or even the Corbin Carroll deal. Yeah. It probably looks like Michael Harris or less than that. And especially coming out the elbow injury too, maybe he's like, oh, I want some security here. So.
Well, and the crazy thing is, like, there are going to be years in which he's a better hitter than Julio Rodriguez. And you're going to get him so much cheaper because he just doesn't have like the things those guys have when they came up, right? Donovan wasn't even in the Cardinals top 30 when he debuted, which, like, amazing, ultimate devil magic player, Brendan Donovan. But yeah, I'm all in on a Donnie extension.
Yeah.
Oh, last thing. I'm sorry. I wanted to say this earlier. I remember back after the Astros won their first championship, when Marwin Gonzalez hit free agency, I remember a lot of people talking about who needed him. And I promise I'll connect this. They said, a lot of teams don't need Marwin Gonzalez because what he is he's the icing on the cake of a championship team. And that's what people called him. They said he's a guy that's going to play all over. He's going to be a utility guy, probably be a well above league average hitter, but he's not going to play one position every day. He might not even be a regular. But they called him like a championship player. And I think Brendan Donovan is of a similar mold in the sense of, like, a really good team needs Brendan Donovans. And if the Cardinals want to be that, like, you need him. And those guys do not grow on trees. They're really hard to find.
Couldn't agree more.
I mean, 2017, Marwin Gonzalez hit to a 907 OPS. I mean, there's a Houston Astros logo on my trash can for a reason, but I don't know. That was an outlier season, but yeah, he was a very, very good player.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see in like the Matt Carpenter types, the Ben Zobrist types, like there's just not every team ends up having one like that, but like they are invaluable when you have them. So Brendan Donovan's easily a top 4 extension candidate. You could argue higher on the list, but it's just why there's a core 4 guys that make a lot of sense here. Well, next on our list is someone that Andrew hates because he calls him the next Paul DeYoung. It is Nolan Gorman. We'll add some context to that in a second, but Nolan Gorman, I think, clearly is a guy that has a ton of potential. And you see the postseason right now. Speaking of a left-handed bat like Brendan Donovan, Nolan Gorman, I mean, left-handed bats win baseball games. And the amount of power this guy has, his eye for the plate already, like he's got a great feel for the strike zone. Even for a guy that strikes out a lot, like I think it's more of just him being aggressive rather than not knowing the zone very well. He hits the ball super hard. And I do think, like, he showed this year that when he's right, he can also be a decent average guy too. So he's not just home run or bust. I don't think he's going to be hitting 300 any season, but could he hit 260 in a good year? I think so. And give you 30, maybe 40 home runs. Like, yeah. And he's improving at second base defensively. He's a guy that long-term too, like if you have to transition to third base, Nolan Arenado won't be here forever. The DH spot's open, first base. Like, I just think there's a lot there. And I think when you think of like a future contending Cardinal team, I think it's hard to imagine them winning a World Series in the next few years without Nolan Gorman having clutch postseason moments. Like, you just imagine him as being one of those guys that's going to be a difference maker in a game 5 of the NLCS. And so when you see a guy like that, you can clearly see this is the kind of guy who could win me a championship. You extend those guys. And he's early enough in that he's proven enough to get the contract, but he hasn't proven enough to get paid like handsomely. And so I think you could probably get him on a decent value too.
I'm with you. I love everything you just said. Also, hilarious that you just attacked Andrew as soon as he's not here to defend.
Right off the cuff.
Yeah, just a bit of context to what Andrew said before I provide my own input here. Andrew basically said something along the lines of, when we were talking about this beforehand, he's wary of the Nolan Gorman hype. He doesn't like that he strikes out as much as he does, and I get that. I'm pretty strikeout averse myself. But he compared his first couple seasons to the first couple seasons of Paul DeJong. And like, for those of you that don't remember, because the recency bias of how bad Paul DeJong was post 2019, it's pretty strong. But before that, Paul DeJong was a really good player. And when the Cardinals gave him that contract, it made a lot of sense. It was definitely the right move. It felt like a bargain. It felt like the type of deal that, could really hurt Paul DeJong because it might keep him away from free agency when he was looking like he was going to be in one of those really strong shortstop classes.
Yeah.
So is that the same with Gorman? No, I'm going to refute that and say no. I think Gorman has a lot of things DeJong just didn't have. Paul DeJong has power. Nolan Gorman has power. Those are two different things. When you look at, Nolan Gorman this year, 405 at bats. Kyle Schwarber this year, 585 at bats. So he's getting about 67 to 69% of Kyle Schwarber's at bats. Gorman hit about 30 bombs. Schwarber hit about 45. Like, that's pretty similar power numbers right there. Now, am I saying that, had you given him, 600 at bats, he was definitely going to hit 45 homers? No, but I'm also saying that it averages out to that. So he might have. If those rate stats stay the same, that's incredible. You're talking about a guy who's going to hit. I mean, I do think at some point in his career, he's going to hit 45 or 50 homers. Look at the way his stats improved across the board between his rookie season and this year. And also, I know I'm kind of going all over here, but something that made me upset with Gorman in his rookie season was people were so quick to write him off, when in reality, he had a fine rookie season, 104 OPS plus, still hit 15 bombs and only 280 plate appearances. But the way those numbers jumped this year, 27 homers, a better average there. Average jumps 10 points, on base jumps 30, slugging jumps 60. That leads to an 80-point percent in 80-point increase in OPS, 13-point increase in OPS plus. And we're talking about a guy who's only 23. Now he's a good fielder. He might get even better. Yeah, this is a guy you lock down. Feel very strongly about it. We're going to say this about a lot of guys because the Cardinals have a lot of young, exciting position player talent.
Exactly. And any of these top 4 guys you talk about, you can make an argument to be the number 1 guy. So I think you're combing through hairs at this point to try and figure out who's actually the number 1 guy. And being at 18% above league average bat in your second season, especially with how bad of a June he had, like, he's probably at 25 to 30% above league average if he doesn't have this just like, I mean, he just looked like he didn't even belong in single A during June. It was so bad.
It was bad.
And
it was bad.
Even through the minor leagues, he's always been a streaky hitter. So you're going to have to take the good with the bad with Gorman, but you expect his highs to be even higher than they have been lately during the future. But then you also are kind of expecting his lows to not be that low. And so you'll probably average out to, next year, I'm kind of expecting him to at least be 125 WRC plus, hitting 30 plus home runs. I mean, he hit 27 in 120 games with cold stretches. Like, I think he's going to hit 35, potentially 40 next year. That strikeout rate comes down even below 30%. Man, you've got a scary hitter. And I just think he belongs in that third spot right between Goldie and Arenado to do the most damage. And so Nolan Gorman's the number 2 guy. The number 1 or number 3 guy, number 2 guy on our list. Andrew and I both had number 1. You had number 5. So I'm interested to see how
I feel a
this
little bit differently. Yes.
goes around. Lars Nootbaar. And so I'll go off the top for me and Andrew. Just the fact that the Cardinals have had a revolving door in the outfield for so long, and Lars Nootbaar is probably the most dependable guy you have right now. Left-handed bat again. He's probably the best mix of power and on-base skills out of the 3 left-handed bats they have right now. So you have that. He can play center field, which is really important, but he's probably best in the corner outfield long term. And so you don't want him necessarily to be your center fielder, but your lineup projects even better if he is. And then the marketability, I think that's something fun, and I think it's helpful for the organization. And he's just a great clubhouse presence. And so I think where you're going to go with this is probably where I think it's a little interesting. Is I don't know what that dollar number looks like. I don't think it's a crazy number, but it's going to be higher, in my opinion, than what Brendan Donovan and Nolan Gorman would get. And AAV wise, it could be higher than what a Jordan Walker would get. So I do think there's some risk with that, and some or maybe not as high of a payoff with paying him early. Like it might not be as like Donovan, Gorman, Walker, you might get a higher like return on your investment if you extend now, while Nootbaar, you might like just make sure you keep him, but you don't really save a lot. So I see both ways, but I just think he's probably the most like, I think out of the 4, he's probably actually the safest in my opinion to go ahead and extend. Maybe Donovan, but I just really like Lars Nootbaar on this team.
No, I understand all of that, and like I love Lars Nootbaar, right? Like I'm a member of a podcast named after him. I love Lars Nootbaar. I can't say that enough. But there are 2 problems with that extension, and it's not that I don't want Lars Nootbaar extended. If the deal is right, yes, extend him right now, right? Like obviously the transaction freeze, but extend him immediately if the deal is right. I'm all in on him. My problems are you have to do it immediately, so you don't get time to sit on it, right? Like if you don't extend Nolan Gorman this year, that's fine. He'll get more expensive, but he's not going to immediately go nuclear and become exorbitant. Lars Nootbaar, if you don't extend him this year and he is even good next year, like he's going to get very, very, very expensive.
Yeah.
I think that's the issue. I think the fact that there's no time to wait for, someone like me who I would say, like, if I was a GM, I'd be a very, very cautious GM. And that's something I like about Mo Zaylock. I think Mo Zaylock's really careful, very deliberative. So this just feels like the type of move that would be pretty aggressive, because it would have to be aggressive. You have to make it now. The other problem is I think Nootbaar knows his value better than a lot of these guys. And that's because he's more proven, but also because Nootbaar was doubted so much, I think, when he came up. And I think he plays with that energy. And I think he knows that he has gone from being somebody that people saw not even as a 4th outfielder. There were people wondering why give up Lane Thomas instead of Lars Nootbaar at the time. Said, a Lars Nootbaar trade was interesting because I don't think he has any value to the St. Louis Cardinals. At one point, he has this year. So I think Lars Nootbaar knows now that he's gone from that to regional superstar. I think he knows his value, and I don't think he's going to be. And I'm not saying the Cardinals should be swindling players, but he's not going to be swindled. That might be something you get, and like with these other guys, I think if you put life-changing money in front of Jordan Walker, he probably says yes. But if you put life-changing money in front of Lars Nootbaar, I think he says, I'm close to free agency. I know my worth. I'm going to go get an absolute bag somewhere.
Yeah, Sandy, with Lars Nootbaar there, I think you want to extend him now. Like, you have to extend him now if you're going to get any kind of discount on him. Otherwise, if you're waiting till after next season, you're at this point probably paying for what you hope he can continue to become or maintain him, rather than like a lot of these extensions, especially the other 3, you're hoping to get a major discount on. And so I think that's a lot of this will just depend on, is he willing to, like, he knows his worth, but does he want to be in St. Louis? And does he value the stability long term, or does he bet on himself more? I feel like he's a guy that'll bet on himself, but we'll see. Okay, so the last extension candidate for us, we all had him as our 2nd ranked guy, and I think he's probably the most likely guy to actually accept an extension would be Jordan Walker. Sandy, why do you think Jordan Walker is such a valuable extension candidate at this point?
Yeah, so I mean, the only guy I had over him was Gorman, and I expounded on how much I love Gorman earlier. But Walker, he's the best prospect the Cardinals have produced in a long time.
Yeah.
And he had a great rookie season, right? We're talking about how good Gorman was this year. Walker was about that good and 2 years younger and with less experience in the league and a bigger sample size.
Yep.
So Walker did pretty much everything right as a 21-year-old offensively. And he had some cold stretches as well. We saw him get sent down. People criticized that move. I actually think it worked out really well. So not only is Walker great at the plate, he seems like he's going to be a good defender. So he was horrible in April and May and June and July and August. But then in September, he looked a lot better. And it was a gradual progression through the year that people who were just watching the errors and just watching the misplays might not have noticed. But if you paid attention, you could see Walker get more comfortable through the year. His first step got so much better. He was just so much better at reading the ball by the end of the season. And that's just what happens for a 21-year-old who comes into the season with less than 50 games of experience at a position. He gets better. These guys are professional athletes. I think people forget that all the time. And not only that, Jordan Walker is an athlete among athletes.
Yeah.
He's a specimen. On top of all that, he just seems incredibly dedicated. He has all the intangibles that you're looking for in a guy. And I would never make that the number one argument for why you keep somebody around, but it helps. And so all of that considered, like, yeah, you lock this guy up. This is exactly what the Braves did with Acuna. They said, hey, Acuna is the best prospect we've produced in who knows how long. And he sort of proved himself in his first season, and then the Braves locked him up, and now he's winning an MVP.
Yep.
That's what you do when you produce someone with this kind of talent. And it's not just internally the Cardinals are saying this. All of baseball said this. Jordan Walker ascended to the number one spot on MLB's top 100. Like, the Cardinals haven't had that impact talent in a while. We haven't seen somebody reach number one, and it was a consensus number one. They had him ranked ahead of guys like Corbin Carroll, ahead of guys like Henderson, ahead of guys like Jackson Churio. And so that matters. And that's something the Cardinals need to jump on now.
Yeah, and you look, I mean, he's a 116 WRC plus guy on the year, and he had his cold stretches, but then the last 2 months of the season, that was 126. He had a 356 OBP, 470 slug. So, like, the power was starting to show as well, which is something that's why they sent him down, because he's not going to be that elite talent if he's hitting the ball into the ground so often. He's hitting those line drives, those fly balls. You can see that he's going to be an elite hitter. And I really do think, like, like you said, Brendan Donovan and Nolan Gorman, you could probably wait another offseason and they're probably going to still not be terribly different in price wise. I think Walker could potentially, like, shoot up in value after this season, because I think he'll show that he's going to be a future, at least above league average corner outfielder with insane pop. Hits for a great average too already, which is awesome coming up. You're not really worried about him being a guy that's going to slump into 230, 240. He's like, he's going to hit 280, 290, probably 300 at his very best. Takes the walks, hits for power. What else could you want? And I just think you also trust the work, like you said, the intangibles too. He's comes from a great family, seems like an incredible guy. You don't really think he's going to take the bag and then start to play awful. He's a guy that genuinely loves baseball. And I just think I said Nootbaar is probably the safest in my opinion of the guys you could extend, but as a hitter, I think Jordan Walker is the safest, where I think his floor as a hitter is probably higher than Donovan, Gorman, and Nootbaar. He just has the ceiling of a future league MVP type guy. Now, do I think that's high expectations, but perennial all-star Jordan Walker, I think, has that written all over him.
Absolutely. And I just think, like, his floor is probably higher than better than what he was this year. And he was a really good hitter this year.
Yeah.
You talk about a guy that is no longer like an absolute drain in the outfield. You look at the WAR from this year and it's like, oh, he was only barely worth positive WAR, but that's really impressive because his defense was that bad for a lot of the season. He was probably worth about 2.0 WAR this year as a rookie. That's amazing. And I mean, he was most praised for during his time in the minor leagues was that power tool. And so seeing that he did most of this without that power tool really showing, like, that tells you how well-rounded of a hitter he is. He's a guy that could hit 30, 35 homers and still bat 290. And those guys are rare. We don't see them all the time.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about him is he's not a power guy we're trying to train to hit the ball. He is a guy with all the power in the world who already knows how to have some elite bat to ball skills. And so, like, I just think it's a matter of time before he goes from, I think people, I mean, a lot of people still have him projected as a 2025 home run guy for a long time. I just think once he figures out the launch angle a little bit better and starts lifting the ball a little bit more consistently, that's a 30 plus home run guy
Oh
with
yeah,
the high
easily.
average, with the OBP. I mean, especially as you're thinking of the future of this team, you think of the continued development of Walker and Gorman as a 3-4 in your lineup, Donovan, Nootbaar as your 1-2. Oof, this team could be really good. And I think you can hit a special sweet spot in 2024, 2025, where you still have a Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, and Wilson Contreras in the middle of your order with these guys ascending. This lineup could be very dangerous.
And one more thing that I just think we should have touched on more with Walker already in this conversation is those elite exit velocities. To be 20 years old when he came up and hitting the ball 115 miles an hour, that's just unheard of. And that's something he did all year. I mean, I can think of a ton of instances in which I saw Jordan Walker flies out sharply to left field. I look at it, it's like 117 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Like you said, once that launch angle changes, you're talking about a guy that's hitting 30 homers.
Yeah. Well, I think I mean, like we said, there's a lot of extension candidates on this team. The top four, easy. I think, if you're looking at the Braves model, you got to go after those four guys as soon as possible. If you can even get two of those guys this offseason done, I think that's huge. And I actually wouldn't mind if part of the reason they don't spend a ton, like if they need to spend on those top two guys, but if they cut a little back on that third guy or something because they've finished some extensions here, I think it makes a lot of sense. So I wouldn't even mind them doing some of those ancillary guys that we talked about, but let us know your extension candidates. Do you agree, disagree? Is there guys you would rank higher, lower, guys you're like, are you out on these extensions in general? I know some people don't love the idea of extending people early. Are you like extend Victor Scotts of the world? Are you in the minor league realm? Let us know what you think on that. As always, click the Lids affiliated link if you're looking at some Major League Baseball and stuff. I mean, Adolis Garcia looks like he might be an American League Championship Series MVP, so maybe you can rep some of that as we go through. Or Jordan Montgomery, who knows? Or get ready for your Sonny Gray Cardinals jersey because we're speaking that into existence.
It's happening.
Or celebrate your Jordan Walker extension with a jersey, we'll be back next week and we've got a lot of fun. We're planning on doing a lot of fun stuff this off season with guests and off season talk. And so subscribe, Newt News, YouTube, all the audio podcast platforms you do, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, we're everywhere. And we'll see you guys next time.